Well, compared to my other reviews, that did not take as long as I thought it would. Arkham Origins, the game that took everyone by surprise, even though its story is something that surprises absolutely no one. Yeah, we actually have a prequel to Arkham Asylum going back to the time of when Batman had just started his crusade, a time before he worked with the GCPD and met as many enemies as he would in later years. But what really drew everyone to it was the game's size. You could explore all of Gotham City with the map being twice as big as Arkham, which was pretty intriguing at the time. However, the game reception-wise was kind of mixed. Some people liked it, others weren't too fond of it, and the rest were just kind of on the fence about it. Now, critically it did well, as the series tends to do, but fans weren't quite as enthusiastic as they were with City. Taking over development this time instead of Rocksteady is WB Montreal Studios, who was also in charge of the development for Arkham City Armored Edition on the Wii U. Coming into this game, I wasn't really too worried since I thought Armored Edition was fine as it is, and all the trailers I saw when researching this game showed it off as the same Arkham action I've come to expect from the series. This is going to be interesting since before this review, I'd only played about an hour of the game. I'll explain how that went later. So then, that's one way to get introduced to a game, but who knows? I mean, maybe there is something worthwhile in this game after all, and let's be honest guys, I think we can all agree that none of the Arkham games are by any means bad. So, in that case, I think we can find something that the game has to offer. Well, with that said, let's talk about the game's story. The game starts on Christmas Eve in Gotham City when Batman receives a distress call from Blackgate Prison. Once Batman reaches the prison, we find out that it was overrun by Black Mask and his henchmen. Technically, this isn't his debut in the Arkham series. He had a small cameo at the beginning of City, but didn't have too much significance overall. Here, he's the head honcho, where he breaks out Killer Croc and kills Police Commissioner Loeb. Batman and Croc duke it out, with Batman ultimately winning. After doing some more investigations, Batman finds out that Black Mask, or Roman Sionis, has hired 8 assassins to take Batman out. Croc was one of them, but we already took care of him. The rest are Deathstroke, an enhanced super soldier with a large kill list, Firefly, who got cancelled after 1 season. What? Is that not it? Is that the right one? Is that supposed to be something else? Oh. It's not the show that got cancelled too early? Well, what is it? Oh. Oh. Okay, let me start over. Firefly, who has a heat fetish. Copperhead, a contortionist who tries way too hard to be creepy. Deadshot, a sharpshooter whose ass we kicked hard in Arkham City. Electrocutioner, who... Oh, wow. Holy shit. Okay, anyway. Lady Shiva, a martial artist who really wants to just test Batman. And lastly is Bane, making his return in the series. In all honesty, I really like this rendition of Bane here, if only because he seems really cunning this time with a slimmer physique. All 8 of them are working to kill Batman before night's end to collect a $50 million reward. After doing more research, we find out that the Penguin has some sort of involvement as we go to get some answers. He let us know that Sionis was murdered in his apartment by an unknown assailant. This leads him to the Gotham City Police Department to gather more evidence, where he runs into some crooked cops who want the bounty, Captain Gordon, who during his days before becoming a police commissioner, and even Barbara Gordon. Batman escapes into the sewers to ensure that he has 24/7 access to the police station's database. Upon further investigations, we find out that Black Mask wasn't killed, but rather kidnapped by his unknown attacker, the Joker. With a trail that leads back to the Gotham Bank, we find out that the Joker was impersonating Black Mask the whole time, and why there is a $50 million bounty on Batman's head to begin with. We then find out that he did this to take over Black Mask's empire, and plant explosives around Gotham's skyscrapers just to blow him up for the laugh of it all. We eventually track them back to the Gotham Royals Hotel, conveniently modeled into a funhouse from hell after only a few days' time. After fighting and beating the shit out of Joker, Bane takes on Batman in a seriously one-sided fistfight when the police come in to overpower them, forcing Bane to make a temporary retreat. Joker, on the other hand, doesn't seem to understand the meaning of the word fallback, with him shooting at Bane, forcing him to retaliate with a fucking rocket launcher, knocking Joker off the building. Batman dives down to save the Joker with the police arresting him. At this point, the story kind of separates, where we follow Joker for a little while at Blackgate Prison. Here is where he meets Harleen Quinzel, who would later become Harley Quinn, and we get to see Joker's backstory. Sort of. It's pretty much just the Killing Joke before it was neutered, except you can actually play through it, which I'll admit is pretty cool. While at the same time we get Batman's backstory, which is overdone so many times it may as well be parodied. Oh wait, it has! Several times! Unfortunately, there is still the assassins to deal with, which at this point is only Bane and Firefly. You may have noticed I haven't talked about the other assassins, but that's only because they add nothing to the overall plot. Yeah, you fight Copperhead for a boss fight, which is pretty cool, but the others have little to no effect on the overall story. Killer Croc was our first boss fight, Electrocutioner went out like a bitch. Hell, even Deathstroke, the guy who was given the most advertisement and press during this game's development, you only fight one time. And after that, he's just stuck in the prison cell. The remainders like Deadshot and Lady Shiva are completely optional, only fought via side quest. I would have liked it if the other assassins were the main threat in the story, but as soon as Black Mask is hijacked, the story just becomes yet another Batman vs. Joker story, which I will say works in the case of this game, but is ultimately disappointing. Granted, I do like a good Batman vs. Joker story when it works well, and to some extent it does here, but I do wish we had more time with the assassins, like maybe they were their own boss fights or something like that. Well, Batman locates Bane from the tracker he placed on him and locates his secret hideout. Upon looking at Bane's computer, he discovers that he's been researching Batman and figures out that Bruce Wayne is indeed Batman. Bruce races back to the Batcave to help Alfred, but not before stopping Firefly from blowing up the bridge. Once we arrive, we see that Bane has absolutely ransacked the place. Everything's destroyed, the computer's damaged, and also left us a dying Alfred. However, since this is a prequel to the previous two Arkham games, and we know that Alfred is alive and well thanks to those, there's no suspense in losing him. So we managed to bring him back through a few electric punches to the chest. Meanwhile, Joker has taken over Blackgate Prison with the help of Bane. Okay, this is a new low, right? This place got taken over twice in the same night by virtually the same people. And I thought Asylum was bad with this stuff. Batman arrives and teams up with the police to take back the prison, and once inside, Bane challenges us to a fight, where if we don't kill him, Joker dies. And in order to save Joker, we have to kill Bane. Honestly, I feel like they're just asking me to do a Batflex joke. Seriously, what else could I make? I could do this. Well, we beat Bane, who suffered from convenient memory loss after hulking out, as we follow Joker into a church. The final fight between them is a standoff in a church on Christmas morning while Care of the Bells plays over our savior duking it out with our demon for the sake of humanity. Well, Joker's been defeated, Batman and Jim Gordon leave on good terms, but if you wait through the credits, you'll hear an interview with Quincy Sharp, who is proposing to reopen Arkham Asylum, where he says it'll make a perfect place for the criminally insane. That's a lie, but hey, at least it did make for a good game. And there's a post-credit scene with Deathstroke being offered a position on the Suicide Squad, which doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things because this plot point is never referenced again. And that's Arkham Origins' plot. Overall, it's an okay story. It's pretty simple and straight to the point. Honestly, my biggest issue with the plot overall is that they just dropped the Assassins and Black Mask as the main villains for the Joker, when I would have liked to see something a little bit more interesting. Now, I love the Joker as a villain, but I would have preferred if we got something more from the likes of Black Mask, which I think would have been a pretty cool guy to go up against. But for the villains we do have, they do their job well. Copperhead is a bit creepy, but enjoyably over the top. Firefly poses a legitimate threat, and Bane has a really cool design. And yeah, let's talk about the Joker. Despite him being in the spotlight for a third time in a row, he's done really well here. What's interesting is seeing a younger version of the Joker starting out, and by God, everything around him is insane. There's piles of dead cops, victims with permanent smiles on their faces, turning the Royal Hotel into a fun house. Seriously, how did he do this again? And it is cool we get to see his backstory. Granted, it is just the Killing Joke. Well, kind of, there are some differences, but the best part is that you get to play through it. It has some great imagery with the Joker's creepy narration, and it does show how strong the connection between him and Batman is. I know to a Batman veteran this is nothing new, but I look at it as its own interpretation. The cinematography is great too, the cutscenes are staged and animated really well, and the camera work makes it feel like more than just a game, which I'll admit was a bit of an issue with the previous games. I mean, it did its job well, but here you actually feel like you're in the scene. Honestly, I would have liked an animated movie based off of this. Oh yeah, we did kind of get that. Okay, nice. The Batman is pretty good, and he and Alfred make some playful banter, which is enjoyable to listen to. The actors all do a good job, which honestly kind of surprised me. Batman and Joker were recasted since this takes place years earlier, and they wanted them to sound a bit younger, or a little less mature. Joker, instead of Mark Hamill, is being played by the Kevin Hart of voice acting, Troy Baker. Technically, this isn't his debut in the series. He was the voice of Robin and Two-Face in Arkham City, But for those who don't know him, Troy Baker is in everything. X-Men, Justice League, Catherine, Naruto, Persona, Soul Eater, and probably his most acclaimed role as Joel in The Last of Us. He does a good job as Joker, even though sometimes it does sound like he's trying a little too hard to sound like Mark Hamill. That's only just a few times though, and the reads are really fun to listen to.
Oh, life would be so simple if you were all I wanted. No, you're just a teeny little distraction compared to what I've got up my sleeve.
Kevin Conroy doesn't return as Batman, whereas this time we get Roger Craig Smith. He's done work as Chris Redfield in Resident Evil, Ezio in Assassin's Creed, and another character who I want you guys to guess. Just listen to his delivery and see if it sounds a tad bit familiar.
When the mugger or the thief stops to think twice, that is fear. That is what I am. That is why they hired assassins, because I am the reason the criminals breathe easier when the sun rises. So no, Alfred, I am not in over my head. Tonight will not be my end, but it will be theirs.
That's right, it's the voice of Sonic. Bet you didn't see that coming. This is what I love about voice actors. You have no idea what else they've been until you looked it up. It's the same reaction I got when I found out Mike Pollock, the voice of Dr. Eggman, was also in Berserk. In all seriousness, he does do a good job, even though it just sounds like Chris Redfield in a Batman suit. Though, in the long run, that may not be a bad thing. He reads his lines well, and he does fit with a younger Batman. Even if at times he sounds like he's passing a kidney stone.
Alfred! Alfred! Come on, damn it. No!
Oh, I think I'm about to pass a kidney stone.
I'm surprised. This story is really enjoyable. I mean, it's simple, straight to the point, and thankfully, unlike City, did not rely a lot on loopholes. Again, Solomon Grundy, what the fuck? It's a perfectly okay story. But with that said, most interesting part of the game's out of the way, and now we got gameplay. And this should take no time at all. Okay, first things first, if you are at all thinking about purchasing Batman Arkham Origins, especially if you're playing the Xbox 360 version, be sure to download the patches to ensure a much more stable game. When I first played this game when I got my new PS3, it froze on me an hour into my playthrough. And from what I've heard, the 360 version's even worse. The PS3, Wii U, and PC versions pre-patched would freeze 3 times per campaign. The 360 version? 6 times. Since the update, I haven't encountered any more freezing, so please download them immediately. Even then, there is still the occasional glitch and some stuttering during FMV scenes. The PS3, Wii U, and PC versions don't have as many bugs, but I just want to clarify. The Xbox 360 version isn't outright broken, it's just a little bit more unstable. That's all. Yeah. Anyway, Arkham Origins gameplay. You know, I'm surprised. Out of all the games I've reviewed so far for this channel, all 13 of them, I don't think I've had an easier time when it comes to jotting down notes for a review. When you get right down to it, Arkham Origins is just a slightly bigger Arkham City. You have the same locations as Arkham City in addition to a new Gotham area to add to the game's world. Batman can equip and use just about every upgrade from the previous game, with a few cosmetic changes here and there, and you can still collect experience points to upgrade these gadgets, which is a bit different since the upgrades in a chain formation. I prefer the original upgrade system, but this also works okay. Arkham Origins doesn't completely retread familiar territory, but the new missions and upgrades aren't really that interesting, and there aren't that many to begin with. Before you break into the GCPD, you get a Concussive Detonator, which is so bare bones that it's laughable. You throw it at a mook, and he temporarily goes apeshit. After you beat Deathstroke, you get the Remote Claw, which is pretty much the line launcher without actually being the line launcher. You could create your own tether and walk along it. You can also use it to mess up enemies by tying them to explosive barrels, and you can later upgrade it to have it attached to gargoyles, but aside from that, that's the extent of its use. The biggest addition to Batman's arsenal has to be the shock gloves, which you get only a few hours in. If you watch the Arkham City review, you'll know that I mentioned that the Wii U version included a BAT system, and it works just the same here. If you beat enough enemies, a bar in the top left corner of the screen fills up, and when it's ready to go, all the enemies become a complete non-issue, which was a bit overkill in City, but is actually kind of welcome here since Arkham Origins brings in new types of enemies, such as bigger guys with added armor, and martial artists who break your combo chain and require an unhealthy amount of countering to take down effectively. Destroying them with the shock gloves is so cathartic for me. They also make Batman's hands huge. I mean, look at these things. They're massive, making a certain someone I know rather jealous.
And you know what they say about men with small hands?
They bitch about it on Twitter. How does he even know I said that? The combat and stealth mechanics work just as well as they did in the last two games, and still leave me satisfied whenever I clear a room of enemies, or take out that last thug in slow motion. However, I couldn't help but notice that enemies were a bit more aggressive this time. I don't know if it's just me, but countering seems to be either delayed, or the window of opportunity to do it seems smaller. It still works just as well, but it's a weird quirk. The world of Arkham Origins, like I mentioned before, is just a slightly bigger Arkham City, and the things you could do are pretty much the same. The streets are swarming with criminals even more than the likes of Arkham City, which was confusing at first, but you gotta remember that this was before Batman set up his reputation, so Gotham being an absolute hellhole at this point does make some sense in that regard. Anyway, you can deactivate these time bombs to stop the likes of Anarchy, which is just this game's Zazzle and not as tedious. You can stop crimes in progress for extra experience and achievements, or you can solve case files, which requires an extensive use of detective mode. Seeing Batman reconstruct the scene of the crime is pretty cool, but having the ability to fast forward and rewind is probably the best part for me. There's just something so hypnotic about watching a man repeatedly get blasted by a panel over and over again. Some side quests include taking out one of the assassins, or facing off with a completely different villain altogether, like Enigma, who is just the Riddler before taking on that persona. And just like the Riddler from Arkham City, there are a shitload of collectibles to obtain before you can actually take him down. Like destroying network relays, thugs to interrogate for specific data pack locations, and a huge amount of searching. Deactivating Enigma's comm towers, on the other hand, does allow you to gain access to your Batwing so you can travel to any point on the map. Considering the extreme size of Gotham City, I am extremely grateful they put in a fast travel option, because flying from one end of the city to another would have been a colossal pain in the ass. Although I do kind of wish we had some music while Batman was flying to each location. I could just imagine him channel surfing on the radio or something.
Moonlight and love songs, never out of date. Uptown girl, she's been living in her uptown world.
I know the way you treated other guys you've been with.
Making my way downtown, walking fast, faces passing.
Gotham City, despite the criminals, feels rather empty. Because of unexpected weather conditions and some kind of curfew, everyone's been issued to stay indoors, leaving the streets completely barren with a sporadic group of mooks, crooked cops, and the occasional Venom carrier. I'm not asking for much, I just wish we had a bit more than what we have now. But besides the main campaign, there's also challenge modes in combat and stealth, where you can play as Deathstroke if you pre-order the game, and where you can also use the alternate costumes. They are really cool and fun to see in action, though the first appearance Batman complete with the purple gloves is a bit ugly if I'm being honest. But if you have the PS3 version, you also have access to the 1960s Adam West costume. I am not kidding when I say this. This alone warrants a purchase on the PlayStation 3. It's Adam West as Batman, he's kicking so much ass. And to think, the game where you punch a shark in the fucking face is the game without this costume. Unacceptable. As far as presentation goes, the game looks fantastic. The city gives off just such a great cold look, and the interior is filled with heavy shadows and harsh lighting. So far, this is the best looking game in the Arkham series, though it will be upstaged for obvious reasons. Can't say much about the music though, it doesn't quite have the same atmospheric sound as Asylum or the epic feeling of City. It goes for a more brooding sound, almost like a Hans Zimmer soundtrack. Some of it's good, the theme during the combat gets you pumped up, the stealth music is a bit intense, and the bosses have a lot of bombastic tracks. Speaking of which, if there's one thing I can definitely say this game does better than the previous two, are the boss fights. Now granted, City had a lot of good ones too, but Arkham Origins ups the ante with a dodge fight between Firefly, a deception battle with Copperhead, and the final boss against Bane is awesome. At this point, he's lost and Hulk's out to chase us, and attacking him head on is pretty much suicide, so you have to lure him out and attack from behind. Bane has some pretty epic strength, he can kill you in one punch. There's also some online multiplayer functions where you can play as both Batman and Robin, or play as one of Joker's henchmen playing like a typical third-person shooter. Pretty simple, but fun to try out from what I've played. The Wii U version doesn't have this function, but the game costs less to compensate. Speaking of which, I don't actually have the Wii U version for comparison's sake, unfortunately. And from what I understand, it is just a simple port, so I just didn't feel like spending the extra money on it. I heard there were some differences though, so unfortunately I don't think I can show that. Thankfully, I know just the person for the job. You see, my cousin Max has both the PS3 and Wii U version of the game, and he offered to describe some of the differences for me. So, with that said, Max, take it away.
Hey there, Sean. Thanks for having me on the show. The differences between Arkham Origins on the PS3 and the Wii U are few and far between. However, there are a few major differences that separate the two. First of all, the graphics on the Wii U seem to look much more enjoyable and offer a better visual experience for the gamer. Second, the touchpad integration on the Wii U makes the game more interactive. When Batman searches different crime scenes throughout the game, the touchpad is used as a window for detective mode. A small, but hey, definitely cool feature. Other than that, well, they're pretty much the same.
Wise words. Very, very wise words. Even though you're completely wrong. Anyway, Arkham Origins has just as much content packed into it as Arkham City, but the problem here is that the content is just more of the same. Almost down to the same line of code. If you're still unsure as to which Arkham game to start out with, then play Arkham City, since I think that's the better experience, Adam West costume or not. Now don't get me wrong, Arkham Origins for all intents and purposes is still a fantastic game. Combat and stealth are still fun, the bosses are great. Honestly, my biggest issue with the game is that it just doesn't do enough to improve on what City established. Which, in hindsight, isn't really a bad thing. I mean, the game never really takes a step backwards aside from the size of the map. And granted, given the time they had, I'm surprised it came out well at all. But with that in mind, you may as well just play Arkham City instead. If you're at all curious about it, you should definitely play it. Just make sure you get the patch updates first. Having the game freezing you during autosaves is nerve-wracking. So yeah, Arkham Origins is a good game with its own merits, but it just doesn't do enough to separate itself from the previous installment. If I got this game at its initial retail price, I'd probably be a little harsher on it, but now that the price is lowered, I feel it is worth getting now. You can get it for like 20 bucks at a GameStop or any other place that sells games. So, 3 down, 1 to go. One final game. Y'all know what it is. Next time we meet, we're going to be looking at the finale of the Arkham series. So, up next, Batman Arkham Knight. Man. Excuse me, guys. I'm going to need some coffee for this one. I'll see you all next time. Oh my god. Fucking Wrangler trophies.